The fallout from yesterday's friendly against Iceland has been an absolute joke, but also it shouldn't come as a surprise. It really shouldn't. If you guys are surprised by the way that the English media has used yesterday's game as a weapon to scapegoat certain individuals, then you haven't been paying attention. I was about to say for like the last decade, but you haven't been paying attention for almost the history of this country. The way the UK media works, right? Again, I'm saying this as somebody who spent most of my life in the US. It works very differently to the US. And that's not to say that the US doesn't have racial undertones when they cover stuff. That's not to say that the US is all of a sudden now the most equally represented country in the media. It treats everybody the right way. That's not me saying that whatsoever. But let me give you guys a bit of insight on this. The biggest two sports in the UK are basketball and American football. And statistically, the majority of both of those leagues are dominated by Black or African American athletes. Therefore, if US media, major US media outlets like ESPN, like TNT, like Fox, if they were to cover those leagues and more specifically those players with the vitriol and the agenda lens that the UK media does with Black athletes, the only reaction would be those NBA and NFL players as a community, as like a brotherhood, going right back at them. I'll bring up an example when we were under lockdown, right? And we were playing in the bubble, the NBA. This was kind of like at the heat of like the Black Lives Matter protests and the death of George Floyd. NBA players as a committee, there's like a whole committee, bro. Like I think Chris Paul at one point was like the president of the Players Association. They basically said, we are not playing a single game until we have clarity from the league that we're not the priority right now. What's happening in the outside world is. They made sure that their struggles were heard. In the UK, the shit don't work like that, bro. Because let's be real, the players don't have as big a voice as they do in the US. The way that Bukayo Saka yesterday was basically made the face of England's defeat to Iceland, even though he played 24 minutes of action as a substitute. It's a travesty, bro. It's a travesty. And it's even more so a travesty because, like I said, it's not a surprise anymore. It's not a surprise that Bukayo Saka has been scapegoated because we saw it happen in the Euro final. It's not a surprise that a Black footballer is being scapegoated because we saw it with Raheem Sterling for the last decade. It's not a surprise that a Black athlete is being scapegoated because we saw it with John Barnes before him. It's not a surprise. It really shouldn't be anymore. It doesn't make it right, but genuinely, right? It's the only country that I can think of that the media for that country is not completely on side of their national team. You never hear this kind of shit from Spain. No, that's not to say, by the way, the Spanish media always covers their team in the right way. But for the most part, they try and defend their national team. I think we can all agree on that. That's not to say Spain is perfect. I'm not saying that. But for the most part, the Spanish media outlets, Marca is the biggest one that I can think of. I can't think of many occasions where the Spanish media outlets scapegoated individual players for their team's failure, for their national team's failure. AS as well too. L'équipe are harsh on everybody. But very rarely do you see L'équipe, after France go out, putting the blame on one player in particular. If anything, they blame everyone. The French are tough of everybody. The US, very similar as well too. The UK, for as long as I can remember, are the biggest haters on their own national team. And it's always the same ones too, if you notice. It's always the Sun. It's always the Daily Mail. It's always the Mirror. It's never like the well-respected ones. But when it is, it makes it even worse. The Guardian, the Telegraph. Which brings us to our second point. Obviously, the timeline today has been dominated, at least football Twitter-wise, in relation to two journalists in particular. One of them is, I think, Jamie Burt from the Telegraph, and the other one is Jacob Steinberg. Now, I don't think I can remember a journalist taking as many L's to his reputation, to his name in one day as Jacob Steinberg has today. To be fair, the last 2 weeks, because let's not forget as well too, from away from everything that got touched on today, which we will speak about, this is the same guy that told us on the eve of the FA Cup final that Erik ten Hag was as good as Saka. That turned out being bullshit. But Jacob Steinberg, man, oh my days. Was it him that within, half an hour of the England game last night, a piece was released on Kobbie Mainoo's ability to play as a defensive midfielder for England? It was him who released that, or was it Jamie Burt from the Telegraph? It was Steinberg, correct. I always say this when it comes to sports analysis, right? There's criticism and there's criticism. People like Steinberg, and I would even say most journalists in general, right? Most analysts, pundits, journalists, they're in the business of speaking about the sport. And sometimes you do have to criticize players. Let's be real. That's the game. If a player is playing bad and your analysis on him was, I don't know, let's take Cole Palmer, for example. You know what? Let's take Bukayo Saka, because Bukayo Saka is the main one today. If Bukayo Saka plays a bad game or a poor game, and the analysis after the game is somebody saying, Bukayo Saka today was poor in his 1v1 duels. He only won 1 out of 5 take-ons against his defender. In front of goal, he was wasteful. He had 3 big chances and missed all of them. On the ball, he was wasteful. He had 70% pass accuracy. Overall, Bukayo Saka today, disappointing day out for him. I didn't think he played well enough. That's analysis purely in the lines of their field. What you're doing is analyzing them in their profession. And that's normal. Every single person in any line of work gets analyzed. Whether you're a customer service worker at a store, at the end of the year, you have your boss analyzes your performance. Either gives you a raise, says good job, more of the same, or he fires you. Just like in football. And if anything, sports, because there's so many eyes on them and because it's a huge form of entertainment and stuff like that, they're going to be criticized or praised more than anybody. They're in the public eye 24/7. What I just said about Bukayo Saka, I think that's fair. If I wanted to say that, for example, like I said, I didn't watch the game, but I'm just saying if that's what I said about Bukayo Saka, that's fair. That's not, in my opinion, racist to say. Because if that's the case, then bro, we might as well not even watch sports, right? We're in the business of analyzing. But I think what's also a beautiful thing about sports as well too is that it's like a public perception thing as well too. So someone is analyzing, but we all have eyes as well too, and we can kind of validate or invalidate that analysis based on stats, based on what we're watching, based on public perception. If within 30 minutes of a game, you're releasing an article on a teenager, just making his name as well too, right? You can count his England appearances on one hand. Coming out 30 minutes into a game, trying to almost like paint the picture as Kobbie Mainoo in today's game has shown why he can't start for England. Releasing match ratings saying, oh, Declan Rice needs a new partner. I'm sure Conor Gallagher will come into the fold. Even though Conor Gallagher, bro, I watched this guy against Brazil. If we want to talk about analysis, boy. Coming out 30 minutes into a game talking about Kobbie Mainoo can't play as a defensive midfielder, which, by the way, he didn't play as a defensive midfielder. That wasn't his role on the pitch for England. Declan Rice is defensive midfielder. Trying to suggest that he was at fault for the goal when, if you watch the goal back, it's a culmination of errors in which he probably has less of a fault in that goal than 3 or 4 other players. John Stones, I'm looking at you. Shocking defending out on the wing. But he's the one that you come out of that situation with the most question marks about. I'm not going to be the person to call you racist because I don't know these people on a face-to-face basis. You can make suggestions, you can make comments that don't bode well in that regard, but to call someone racist, that's not something I'm going to go and do. But there's no question at all that there are some things that people say that even if they don't mean it or not, there's racial stereotypes behind it. There are. And it's almost always, to prove this point, the same players that get this stick, right? I'm going to go back to Bukayo Saka. The summer of 2021 when England lost in the final to Italy on penalties. Granted, it's a penalty shootout. The 3 guys that missed their penalties were Bukayo Saka, Jadon Sancho, Marcus Rashford. So you couldn't leave that game not talking about them. But the reaction to 3 young black men missing a penalty shootout after their team, who scored within 10 minutes and didn't have a shot on target the rest of the game, playing at home, how they faced the majority of the brunt both after the game and for the several months and seasons that came after it, compared to the way Harry Kane, a year later at the World Cup, was treated when his penalty prevented England from at least going to extra time with France. Some things don't need to be explained. Some things don't need to be explained. So, like I said, the way I started this off by saying, it's sad. It's a travesty for me, but it's not surprising. It's really not surprising. And the issue is there's nothing really that we... I say we, I'm just an outsider here, that England fans and England as a whole and the players, there's nothing that they can really do about it. Because it's not like you can like just boycott these papers. It's not like you can put all the hit pieces on Instagram. I saw Versus, they released a beautiful statement today. It's not going to do anything realistically. It's great that they're bringing awareness to the subject, but there's nothing that's like, I reposted it, Sharky reposted it, big influencers reposted it, Ian Wright commented on it. There's nothing that anyone can really do about it because it's a cultural issue. The culture of English media and the culture of most English people as a country, it's a flawed one. It's a flawed one. And it's very hard to change a culture overnight. It is. It's very, very difficult to do so. And it's even more difficult to do so when the players who are directly being impacted by this, there's only so much that they can say. And then they wonder why players have no personality when it comes to social media or when it comes to interviews and stuff like that. I'll tell you this, right? A very popular social media outlet that I've worked with in the past. They had a piece with Raheem Sterling that they made ahead of, I want to say Euro 2021 or ahead of the World Cup, one of the two. And it was to do with Raheem Sterling talking about his favorite moment as an England fan. And I think the moment that he chose was Joe Cole's goal against Sweden in 2006. And I spoke to the people who did the interview. They told me, wow, it was such a great experience. Like Sterling was such a joy to work with. the way he was talking about Joe Cole's goal, it's like he almost like became a kid again in that moment. Like it would have been a great piece to camera showing one of England's best players proving and expressing how much of a fan of this national team he is, how much he loves representing England. That piece never saw the light of day because his agent was so terrified that that piece would be spun in some way by the UK media, one way or another, that they decided, while this could actually improve Raheem Sterling and Sterling's image in the media, which by all means he shouldn't have to do, they were more scared that the media would find a way of turning it against him, even worse than it already was. That's what you're up against here, man. The player and his representatives are so terrified of these media outlets that they'd rather not say anything whatsoever. I mean, Sterling for me is the most damning one, man. I remember the gun tattoo on his leg. I remember him buying a house for his mom, him buying a car, him having a kid at a young age with his girl. All this stuff was used to vilify him. And the most rotten thing about all of that is that those media outlets used those things about him to try and vilify him. Oh, he has a gun. What is he? From a bad environment? Is Raheem Sterling a bad guy? Does he use guns? Raheem Sterling buys a house, a huge mansion for his mom. Wow. Talk about not giving shit about the working class people. They use that to weaponize him. With Bukayo Saka, they don't even bother. They don't even bother looking for something to weaponize him. Because the truth is, with Bukayo Saka, bro, the kid never speaks. He's a model professional. He just plays his game. He's good with the kids. Well-spoken, very likable guy. Good player. Been one of England's best performers the last few years. He doesn't even give the media an inch. Not saying Sterling did, but they found something on Sterling. On Saka, Saka doesn't give them an inch, and they still take a mile. And they still take a mile, man. Saka doesn't give them an inch, and they still take a mile. So that's why for me, right? And me, I don't give a shit about the England national team anyways, because I have no connection to them. But this is why I understand as well, too. They won't say it in public, but I know a lot of people, big influencers, big content creators, they're English. And when it comes to the Euros, of course, they can't help but support their national team. But when England inevitably loses and gets knocked out, and trust me, we all know what's going to happen, right? That's the beauty of the England national team, too, as well, too, as an outsider. I think it's hilarious because every 2 years without fail, you know they're going to go out and you know what the reaction's going to be, bro. It's like watching a car crash in live person from like the comfort of your home on TV. And every 2 years, you know that car crash is going to happen because they're going to do the same shit over and over. And then you always know the aftermath of it as well, too. So me, bro, I just watch this unfold every single year, not surprised whatsoever how it goes. But this is why a lot of big England fans, big content creators and stuff like that, they support England throughout the tournament because they can't help it. They're English. They have pride for their country. But the minute they lose and they see the aftermath and the fallout from the media outlets and fans and stuff like that, and the way the country all of a sudden united for 2 to 3 weeks, the minute they lose, everyone goes against each other again. That's why most of them will tell you, maybe off camera they would tell you, I'd almost rather not want England to win a tournament because of these fans and the people of England actually deserve a trophy. I'll leave that to you guys. One last thing, by the way. Don't let anybody tell you that these media outlets post black players on the front of their articles when England lose and white players on the front of their articles when England wins. Don't let anybody tell you that that's a coincidence or that's on accident. I went to journalism school. I've spoken to actual journalists. I've been in contact with actual media outlets, The Guardian, all those guys. Nothing about that is coincidental. I promise you that. Nothing is coincidental. There's nothing to do with that. I promise you it's not coincidental. These people are calculated.